Ready for a deep dive. We're really getting into it today, exploring Irvin D. Yalom's new W, A Matter of Death and Life. It's not your typical death and dying kind of book.
No, not at all, and especially because it's, well, co-written with his wife Marilyn as she was, facing a terminal illness.
Yeah.
We're working with excerpts from the book, so it gets very personal very quickly.
Like we're right there with them.
Exactly, and I think what makes this even more powerful is that Yalom isn't just like some observer, right? He's this world-renowned psychiatrist
Right.
dealing with his own mortality at the same time as he's caring for Marilyn. It's a lot.
Talk about a heavy perspective on life and death.
It really is. It's like he's got this double lens, you know, his professional background, but then this incredibly personal experience happening at the same time.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. So today we're unpacking the unexpected realities of grief, how fragile memory can be, and ultimately what this book has to say about living a life, well, with no regrets.
And it's not all, doom and gloom. There's this really incredible love story at the heart of it.
Oh, yeah.
This deep connection between them that shines through, even with all the adversity they face.
Okay, so picture this. Irvin Yalom at the top of his field, and then, bam, this diagnosis hits. Marilyn, his wife of 65 years, has multiple myeloma.
And they don't shy away from the tough stuff. Chemo, the ups and downs of searching for any kind of treatment, hoping for a miracle. It's a tough reality check on how brutal these illnesses can be.
For sure. And you see Yalom grappling with it all, wanting to be the doctor who can fix things, but also just being the husband who wants more time. It's a lot to carry.
It's that constant push and pull between hope and acceptance. He's got the medical knowledge, but that doesn't make it any easier to actually accept what's happening.
No, not at all. But here's where Marilyn's strength really comes through. Even facing all of this, she is determined to find joy, in the everyday.
Absolutely.
Being with family, gardening, the little things. Those are her anchors.
It's that reminder that even in really dark times, those small moments, those connections, they're powerful. It's about the resilience of the human spirit.
It's inspiring, for sure. And it's not just Marilyn, their kids, their grandkids, their friends, everyone's rallying around them. You can really feel that love, that strength coming from their community.
It shows how important it is to have that support, to not go through these things alone. They leaned on their shared history, their love for each other, to navigate it all.
You see Yalom leaning on his medical background, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to understand Marilyn's illness, being there for her care. But, and maybe this is a strange question, did it make it harder? Knowing all the medical details.
I think there's no doubt it added another layer to their experience.
Yeah.
He's got this insider knowledge, but it came at a cost. Like, he was always aware of the bigger picture.
Right. And that picture wasn't always the best. Heavy stuff. But through all that weight, their love story really does shine through. The way they reminisce about their lives, their travels, their family. It's clear how deep their bond ran.
And that's what makes it more than just a story about illness. It's about how strong love can be, how it shapes us, holds us up, even when facing something like death. It's beautiful, but also, bittersweet.
It really makes you think about your own relationships, what you'd want to say, what you'd hold on to if you're in their shoes. It's heavy stuff, but it's also just being human. Right?
Absolutely. And it's about to get even more real because as Marilyn's dealing with her mortality, Irvin's confronting his own aging, especially his memory, which, isn't what it used to be.
Talk about a strange twist, right?
Totally.
This guy, an expert on the human mind, is facing his own cognitive decline. The irony is pretty thick.
And he owns it, too. There's this, it's actually kind of funny. This story he tells about forgetting to brush his teeth one morning.
No way.
He jokes about needing reminders for the simplest things.
It's kind of heartbreaking, but also, well, we've all been there, right? Forgetting something basic. It's a good reminder that aging doesn't play favorites. Even the brightest minds go through it.
Exactly, and it adds this whole other layer to their story. It's not just about Marilyn's illness anymore. It's about those universal experiences we all share,
Yeah.
Getting older, losing people, how time just seems to slip away. It's a lot.
It really is. And those themes, they become even more intense as Yalom talks about losing close friends, especially his buddies from medical school. He talks about this feeling of being the last one standing, carrying all these memories as his friends pass away one after another.
It really makes you think about the cycle of life and death and how deeply we're connected to the people around us, how those bonds shape our understanding of, everything, including our own mortality.
It's heavy stuff, for sure. But that's also what makes this book so engaging. It doesn't shy away from the big questions. It makes you face them head on, right alongside Irvin and Marilyn.
It does. And it's about to get even deeper, because as Marilyn's illness gets tougher, Irvin starts experiencing this feeling of unreality. It's like there's this lag between things happening and him actually processing them. And it really emphasizes how deeply Marilyn's absence is already affecting him, even before she's physically gone.
Man, that's powerful.
It is.
And heartbreaking, honestly, but also maybe a little relatable for anyone who's experienced loss. Grief has its own timeline, right? It doesn't care about our expectations or schedule.
Absolutely. It hits you when it hits you, and in its own way, every time.
Yeah.
And I think it's through this experience, along with, his years as a therapist, that Yalom starts to develop some really insightful observations about grief and loss in general.
Okay, so we're getting into his therapist side now.
Yes, exactly. But this time, it's personal. It's like he's getting a crash course in grief, but he's both the student and the subject.
A front row seat to his own emotional breakdown.
In a way. And he doesn't hold back. For example, there's this story about a patient, Irene, who is grieving, and she really calls him out.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. She basically says he lives this comfortable, cozy life, and there's no way he could ever understand real loss.
Oof. Talk about a blow to the ego, especially for someone like Yalom.
It definitely rattles him. He even admits to getting defensive at first, a little guilty, because deep down, he knows he doesn't fully get what she's going through. Not yet, anyway.
It's like grief is this vast, deep ocean, and he's still on the shore trying to understand its power from a distance.
That's a good way to put it. And I think going through that experience with Irene, that's part of what leads to Yalom's realization that sometimes experiencing loss firsthand, like really going through it yourself, is the only way to truly get it.
It's a humbling realization. Even for someone with all his experience and knowledge, it goes to show that no matter how much we study something, how much we think we know, life will always find ways to challenge our understanding and force us to grow.
Definitely. And it speaks to the importance of lived experience, how powerful it can be. Books and theories can only take us so far. Sometimes you just have to be in the trenches to truly get it.
It's like that old saying, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. But in this case, it's walking with them through their grief.
Yes, exactly. And it's not an easy journey for anyone, but the fact that Yalom is so willing to share his experience, his struggles, his insights, it makes the whole thing a little less daunting, don't you think?
I think so too. And speaking of daunting, grief can throw some pretty wild curveballs.
Tell me about it.
And Yalom doesn't shy away from that either. Like when he talks about experiencing this surge in sexual energy after Marilyn's death, it's not exactly something we associate with grief, but it's more common than we realize.
It's definitely one of those taboo subjects, right? Like, are you even allowed to feel desire or even joy when you're supposed to be in mourning?
Right. It feels wrong.
Exactly. But Yalom's honesty about it is refreshing. He's not afraid to talk about the stuff that makes us uncomfortable.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you can tell there's this internal struggle too. On one hand, he's got this renewed sense of vitality.
Yeah.
But then there's guilt. Like, it betrays his love for Marilyn.
It's a very human thing to feel, that conflict. And he doesn't pretend to have all the answers. In fact, he talks about how little research there actually is on this particular aspect of grief, how often it gets swept under the rug or dismissed because it makes people squirm.
Like there's this whole other layer to the grieving process that we're only starting to scratch the surface of.
Exactly. And Yalom's willingness to at least bring it up, to be open about it, it's huge. It validates what so many others are going through but might feel afraid to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. There's actually this one part I wanted to ask you about. He talks about almost propositioning his friend Marcia.
Oh, right. At dinner.
Yes,
Yeah.
He's feeling this attraction, this pull, and the way he writes about it. I don't know, it's such a perfect mix of humor and vulnerability.
Huh.
It's classic Yalom.
It's him to a T, finding a way to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Even when it's tough. Not to diminish it, but just to get through it, you know?
Yeah, and honestly, I think that's what makes his story so powerful. He's not some untouchable expert on grief. He's right there with us, figuring it out as he goes.
Totally. And speaking of figuring things out, in the middle of all this, the grief, the unexpected emotions, the aging process, he starts taking these baby steps back into the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is where things start to feel hopeful again, right?
Absolutely.
It starts small, like going to a senior lunch group, playing poker with his son. Everyday stuff, but suddenly it means so much more.
It's like those first tentative steps after a major injury. It's going to be painful, a little scary, and you don't know how it's going to go, but you have to do it to heal. And Yalom is honest about how much he struggles with those first steps. He doesn't want to face the world without Marilyn.
I bet. I can't even imagine that feeling of being adrift, having to rebuild your life without the person who's been your rock for, what, 65 years?
It's got to be incredibly disorienting. But here's where things get interesting again. He's rereading his novel, The Schopenhauer Cure, and he stumbles across this passage where a character's dealing with a surge in sexual energy after losing his wife. Life imitating art.
No way. It's like he predicted his own experience in his writing. Makes you think about the subconscious, right? All the stuff going on under the surface that we're not even aware of.
Right. Maybe he already understood that aspect of grief on some level, even if he wasn't consciously thinking about it at the time.
It's crazy how the mind works like that.
Yeah.
But even with those moments of insight, he doesn't sugarcoat how hard everything is. He's real about his anxiety, his despair, and all the stuff that comes with getting older, like memory problems and his mobility declining.
And I think that's what makes it so powerful, his honesty, his vulnerability. He doesn't try to make himself seem invincible or like he's got it all figured out. He's right there in the thick of it, just like the rest of us.
It's almost like he's starting over in a way.
In a way, yeah, absolutely.
You know, Marilyn's gone, and he's got to figure out, I don't know, who he is now, how to be on his own after, 65 years.
It's huge, and he doesn't downplay that at all. At 88, staring down his own mortality, having to relearn how to just be, well, alone after all that time, it's a massive shift for anyone, even someone as, aware of himself, as Irvin Yalom is.
Yeah, like someone just dropped him into a completely new life with, like, zero instructions.
Right.
He even says he feels lost, can't make decisions, even procrastinating on the little things, which, for him, is crazy.
Right. That was never him before. It's like grief just threw this, I don't know, this wrench into how his brain worked or something.
It just shows you how deep grief goes. It's not just in your head. It's like your whole body, your mind, everything gets thrown off.
It's true. And Yalom, he calls this whole thing his, and I'm quoting here, postgraduate education in grief.
Wow.
Like, even with all his years as a therapist, nothing could really prep him for actually going through it.
And that's where his therapist side really comes out, I think.
Oh, totally.
He's not just feeling all this grief, he's analyzing it, almost like he's his own patient.
Like he's doing this real-time experiment on himself, and luckily for us, he's taking notes the whole way.
Right. And he's so open about it all. The tough parts, the moments of, just feeling lost. But he also finds these little things that give him strength.
Like his writing, he dives back into work.
Oh, yeah, he talks about that.
Revisiting his old books, and it's like this lifeline for him.
Like writing gave him this outlet, a way to process all those messy feelings into something real.
Exactly. And there's this one part that always sticks with me. He's rereading his novel, The Schopenhauer Cure, and he comes across this passage about, well, it's that theme again, a character dealing with a sudden surge in sexual energy after his wife dies.
Get out. It's like he predicted his own grief in his own book.
Right. Makes you wonder about how the mind works, how we might understand things on some level, even if we don't realize it yet.
It's wild.
Yeah.
But even with those, glimpses of understanding, he doesn't shy away from how hard it is. The anxiety, the tough days, even just the stuff that comes with getting older, the memory problems, not moving as well.
And that's what I think makes his story so powerful and ultimately hopeful. He's not some grief expert with all the answers. He's right there with us, figuring it out as he goes.
Totally. And it's that honesty, that vulnerability that makes him so relatable. And you start to see him, little by little, reconnecting with the world, finding moments of joy, even without Marilyn.
Like when he pushes himself to go to that senior lunch or play poker with his son, those tiny steps forward, they mean so much.
Learning to live again, one day at a time, right?
Yeah.
And he starts to see that there's still good in the world, even in the simple things. A good meal, talking with a friend, enjoying nature.
It reminds us that even with grief, even when it hurts, there's still beauty to be found if you look for it.
And choosing to see that beauty, I think that's what his story is really about. Choosing to keep living, even when it's hard. And speaking of choices, I think that last letter he writes to Marilyn at the end, it just gets me every time.
It's powerful stuff, the love, the sadness, but also this deep thankfulness for their life together.
It's like he's saying goodbye, but also acknowledging that their love, their connection, it doesn't just disappear, It lives on in him.
And that's such a beautiful message. The people we love, the memories we make, they become a part of us. They shape who we are, even when they're gone.
And that brings us back to, the core of New W, a matter of death and life.
Yeah.
It's not about easy answers to grief, because those don't exist. It's about facing the big questions, the tough emotions, with honesty, and in the end, with love.
It's about understanding that grief is a journey, not a finish line, and there's no right way to go through it. What matters is finding what helps you heal, what helps you live a life that's full and meaningful, even with the weight of that loss.
And sometimes that means letting ourselves feel joy again, finding those moments of beauty, connecting with people, and honoring the people we've lost by really truly living the life we have left.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive into NEW, A Matter of Death and Life, there's this one idea Yalom talks about that I keep coming back to. The idea that consciousness is like a river flowing through time. Death, it's not the end, but like a transition, something beyond what we can really grasp right now, but something that ties us all together in ways we're just starting to understand.
It's a powerful image, right? And whether you believe in an afterlife or not, there's something comforting about it, that our essence, our spirit, it continues on.
It gives you that glimmer of hope, of wonder, and reminds us that even with death, there's still so much we don't know, so much to think about, to talk about, to explore.
And that's what we hope you'll take away from this deep dive. Don't shy away from those big questions, from those tough conversations, and cherish the time you have with the people you love. Because in the end, that's what it's all about, right?